The summer heat in Harlan County, Kentucky didn't arrive gradually. It descended thick and absolute like a wool blanket pressed flat against the earth sometime in late July, and refused to lift until the first rains of September gave it permission to leave. By mid-August, the air above the red clay roads shimmered in visible waves, and the few trees that lined the fence posts along Route 9 looked less like living things and more like exhausted men leaning on their shovels. Ray Calloway had been awake since 4:30. That wasn't unusual. He'd been waking at 4:34 so long that his body no longer needed an alarm. It simply opened his eyes in the dark, registered the particular quality of silence that precedes dawn in the country, and began calculating the day's work before his feet hit the floor. Feed the chickens, check the irrigation line on the east field, patch the section of fence near Miller's Creek where the deer kept pushing through, rotate the hay bales before the moisture got into the bottom ones. He moved through his small farmhouse the way men move through spaces they've inhabited alone for too long, efficiently, quietly, without looking at things directly. The kitchen was clean in the way of necessity rather than care. A single mug on the drying rack, a cast iron skillet hanging from a nail above the stove, and a calendar on the wall with dates crossed out in red marker, and a note in the margin of August 14th that read, "Cole, dentist, 3 p.m. His son, 14 years old and already taller than Ray had been at that age, already carrying in his jaw that same quiet stubbornness. Cole was still asleep. Ray let him sleep. The boy had been helping with evening chores since he was 8, and a teenager who worked the land deserved his mornings. Ray poured his coffee, black, no sugar, and stood at the screen door looking out at the property. 12 acres. Not enough to make a man rich, barely enough to make a man independent. He leased it from Gerald Moore, who owned most of the farmable land in this part of the county, and had the particular brand of patience that comes from knowing you hold all the leverage. The rent had gone up twice in 3 years. Ray had paid it both times without comment, which Gerald seemed to interpret as acceptance rather than the quiet desperation it actually was. The truck needed a new alternator. The irrigation pump on the south end was making a grinding sound that Ray recognized as the early warning sign of a bearing about to fail. He owed the agricultural supply store in Loyo $412 on a line of credit he'd opened in April, and the corn yield this season had come in 6% below his estimate due to the dry spell in June. Ray Calloway was a man who lived close to the edge of things, not dramatically, not in a way that invited sympathy or conversation, just in the steady, grinding way that millions of rural Americans lived, one repair away from falling, one bad season away from making a phone call they'd been dreading for years. He finished his coffee, set the mug in the sink, went to work. By 9 in the morning, he'd already fixed the fence, checked the irrigation line. The bearing on the south pump was worse than he'd thought. It would need replacing by the end of the week, and was driving the long way around his property in his 2009 Ford F-250. The truck that he'd bought used from a man in Cumberland for $6,500 in cash 7 years ago, and had been maintaining through sheer mechanical stubbornness ever since. The long way around took him past the eastern boundary of his leased land, along the dirt road that ran between his property and the old Whitfield parcel, 240 acres that had been sitting largely idle for the past few years, since old Connie Whitfield had passed and her estate had gone through what the county courthouse described as a prolonged settlement process. There were rumors that it had finally been sold, but Ray hadn't paid much attention to rumors. He had enough real problems. He noticed the vehicle first. It was parked, or rather abandoned, at an awkward angle on the edge of the dirt road, half on the grass. A late-model pickup truck in a shade of dark green that still held its shine, which meant it was either new or rarely used. Not a work truck. Behind it, connected by a ball hitch, was a mid-sized agricultural tractor, a John Deere 5075E. Ray noted automatically, the kind of machine that ran about $45,000 new, and it was sitting dead still with the hood raised. Ray slowed without thinking about it. A raised hood on a piece of equipment was the universal rural signal for "I need help," regardless of who was doing the asking. He pulled up alongside and cut the engine. The person standing on the tractor's front step, leaning over the open engine compartment, was a woman. She was wearing jeans, real ones, not the kind designed to look like work jeans, and a simple pale blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she was holding a wrench with the concentrated expression of someone who has been given instructions they don't quite believe. She looked up when she heard his door. Ray took her in without expression. She was young, late 20s maybe, with the kind of face that was striking without being showy about it. Dark eyes, sharp and alert. She didn't look frightened by him, which he noted as a point in her favor. Strangers, in his experience, were often either too familiar or too wary, and she was neither. She just looked at him the way you look at someone who might be able to help. "Morning," Ray said. "Morning." She held up the wrench slightly, as if presenting evidence. "I think I've made it worse." He walked to the front of the tractor and looked into the engine compartment. She hadn't made it worse. The problem was a fuel system issue. Likely a clogged primary fuel filter combined with air in the lines, possibly made more complicated by someone cranking the engine repeatedly after it stalled, which tended to make these things more difficult. It wasn't severe. He'd seen it before. He could fix it. "You try to start it after it stalled?" he asked. 4 times, she admitted, with a slight wince that acknowledged she'd suspected that was wrong. "That'll do it. You've got air in your fuel lines now on top of the filter issue." He looked at her. "You got tools in that truck?" "There's a box in the bed." "I don't know what's in it." Ray got his own toolbox from the F250, the serious one, the one bolted to the floor behind the seat, and went to work. He didn't talk much while he worked. He never did. His hands moved with the specific economy of a man who has spent 20 years maintaining equipment that doesn't have the luxury of being taken to a dealer, who has learned to diagnose by sound and feel and smell, who carries the mechanical knowledge of 10 different machines in his fingers the way some people carry languages in their tongue. She didn't hover, which he appreciated. She sat on the tailgate of her truck, watching without crowding him, and after a few minutes she said, "I'm Sophia." "Ray." A pause. "Is this your land?" she asked. "No, mine's the other side of that fence." He tilted his head east without looking up from the engine. "This is the Whitfield parcel." "Yes." A brief silence. "I've been trying to understand the property. There's more of it than I expected." Ray didn't comment on that. People who had more land than they expected were not, in his experience, people who needed his observations about it. "What were you planning to do with the tractor?" he asked, practically, not nozzily. "I was trying to get a sense of the field conditions on the north end. I read that you could use it for—" She paused, and he heard the slight hesitation of someone reading from memory rather than experience. "Soil turnover assessment?" Ray looked up at her for the first time since he'd started working. She met his eyes without flinching. "You're not a farmer," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was simply a fact, delivered with the same neutral precision he'd used to diagnose the fuel filter. Something shifted in her expression, not offense, but a kind of rueful acknowledgement. "No," she said. "I'm not." "Then why are you out here alone with a tractor you don't know how to run?" She considered the question seriously, which he hadn't quite expected. "Because I wanted to understand something before other people explained it to me," she said. "Does that make sense?" Ray thought about it for a moment, his hand still moving inside the engine compartment. "Yeah," he said. "It does." They didn't talk for a while after that. The heat pressed down on both of them, and somewhere in the tree line a mockingbird was cycling through its repertoire with manic energy, and the smell of motor oil and dry grass hung in the air between them like something comfortable. At 10:47, Ray knew the time because he'd glanced at his watch when he'd heard the bearing grinding earlier, and had been tracking hours against tasks since the tractor engine turned over. It ran clean and even. Ray stood back and listened to it for 10 seconds, then nodded once. Sophia slid off the tailgate. She stood beside him and listened to the engine too. And on her face was an expression he recognized, the specific quiet satisfaction of something broken becoming whole again. "Thank you," she said. And then, with a directness that caught him slightly off guard, "What do I owe you?" "Nothing, Ray, I was driving past." He closed the engine hood. "It's not a favor, it's just what you do." She looked at him for a moment. He got the sense she wasn't accustomed to that answer. "Well," she said finally. "Thank you anyway." He nodded, picked up his toolbox, and walked back to his truck. He didn't look in the rearview mirror when he drove away. But he thought about the way she'd said, "I wanted to understand something before other people explained it to me," and found that it stayed with him longer than he would have predicted. All through the afternoon's work, through supper with Cole, through the long blue quiet of the Kentucky evening. He didn't know her last name. He didn't think about asking. Cole was doing homework at the kitchen table when Ray came in from the evening chores, and the particular configuration of textbooks, pencil, and barely concealed phone told Ray that the homework had recently been supplemented by something more interesting. "How was school?" Ray asked, washing his hands at the sink. "Fine." Cole looked up. He had his mother's eyes, a warm brown with a slight upturn at the corners, and Ray's jaw and Ray's stubbornness, which was either a blessing or a burden depending on the day. "You hear about the Whitfield land?" Ray dried his hands. "What about it?" "Daniel Morrison said his dad said it sold to some company out of Nashville or somewhere. They're gonna do something with it." Cole shrugged with the elaborate indifference of a teenager conveying information he's actually very interested in. "People are saying it might be some big agricultural thing, like corporate farming." Ray opened the refrigerator, looked at its contents without enthusiasm. "People say a lot of things. His dad said Gerald Moore is worried they'll try to buy him out too, and then the whole Eastern Valley is just going to be one big operation." Cole paused. "Would that affect us?" Ray took out leftover chicken and a container of rice. "Probably not." He said it calmly, and Cole accepted the calmness, and they ate supper mostly in silence with the ceiling fan turning overhead and the sound of crickets building outside. But Ray turned the question over privately. The way he turned over problems that didn't have immediate solutions, carefully, without urgency, just keeping them warm. If corporate money was moving into this valley, the price of leased land would go up. Gerald Moore would smell the opportunity from 10 miles away, and Ray's already thin margin would get thinner. He washed the dishes, let Cole watch TV for an hour, sat on the porch in the dark for a while before bed, listening to the land breathe. He thought again, briefly, and without quite knowing why, about the woman on the road. "I wanted to understand something before other people explained it to me." He went inside. He went to sleep. 3 days later, Ray was at Beaumont's Hardware on Main Street in Loyal when he saw her again. He almost didn't recognize her. She was wearing different clothes, linen trousers, a simple cream-colored blouse, and she was standing at the service counter talking to Pete Beaumont's teenage son, Marcus, who was 17 and currently failing to be helpful in the way that 17-year-olds do when confronted with a request they don't know how to process. Ray paid for his pump bearings and was heading for the door when she turned and their eyes met. "Ray," she said his name with a recognition that was warmer than he expected. "Morning." He stopped. "Tractor running, okay?" "Started right up this morning." A brief smile. "I felt unreasonably proud. You should." He meant it. A machine that ran was a small victory against entropy, and small victories deserved acknowledgement. Marcus Beaumont was watching this exchange with open curiosity. Ray ignored him. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said. "Go ahead." "The field on the north end of the property, the soil is different there. Darker, more compact. Do you know why that is?" Ray set his bag of parts down on the counter, because this was a question worth a proper answer. That north section used to be a wetland, probably 50, 60 years back. Someone drained it at some point. You can see the old drainage channels if you look. Soil there's got a higher clay content, holds water different. You'd need to test the pH before you did anything with it, and depending on what you're planning, you might need to aerate it significantly before the first season. She was listening with the focused attention of someone who genuinely wanted to understand, not just gather confirmation. He noticed again that quality in her, the directness of actual curiosity rather than polite interest. "What would you plant there?" she asked. He thought about it. "Depends on the long game. Short term, if you're trying to assess what the soil can do, winter wheat. It's forgiving, and it'll tell you a lot about what you're working with. Long term, that kind of soil, properly managed," he paused, "could be excellent for soybeans, if the drainage is improved." She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, "How do you know all this?" "I've been farming this land for 12 years, Ray said. "And my father farmed land like it for 30 before that." There was something in the way she heard that, a slight shift in her expression, something between respect and something more complicated. He didn't know what to do with it, so he picked up his bag of parts. "You have a good agronomist?" he asked. "I have someone who comes highly recommended," she said, with a slight dryness that suggested highly recommended and actually useful were not synonymous in her experience. "Get a second opinion." He moved toward the door. "That north field'll punish you if you rush it, Ray." He turned. She hesitated for just a moment, a hesitation that looked uncharacteristic on her, like a movement she didn't usually make. "Thank you, again." "Don't thank me for advice," he said. "Just use it if it's good." He drove back to his property with the windows down and the radio off, and the conversation turned over in his mind with a strange, almost pleasant weight. He didn't see her for 5 days after that. In those 5 days, he replaced the south pump bearing, which took most of a morning and 2 calls to a parts supplier in Middlesbrough. Had an argument with Gerald Moore's property manager about a fence line that Gerald had decided he wanted moved 6 feet in a direction that would cost Ray access to a water source, and received a letter from Cole's school noting that Cole's mathematics grade had dropped to a C- and suggesting a parent conference. The fence argument he handled with contained fury and eventual compromise. The letter from the school he handled by sitting across from Cole at the kitchen table and asking, without accusation, what was going on with math. Cole was quiet for a long time. Then, "It's not the math. What is it?" Another long silence. Outside, a light rain had started, the first real rain in 2 weeks, and it tapped against the window with a steady patience that seemed to give Cole permission to speak. "Danny Morrison got a car," Cole said. "His dad just bought it." "No, and I know it doesn't matter, but..." He stopped. Ray waited. "I just get tired of..." Cole looked at the table. "I get tired of it always being so hard here. Like everything we have, it took forever to get it, and it's never quite enough. And I'm not saying I don't think you're doing anything wrong, Dad. I know you work hard. I know," Ray said. Cole looked up. "I know," Ray said again. And that was all he said, because there was nothing else honest to say. He didn't tell Cole that it would get easier because he didn't know if it would. He didn't tell him that hard work was always rewarded because he'd seen too much evidence to the contrary. He just sat with the truth of it alongside his son in the sound of the rain. What he did do, after Cole went to his room after the rain had settled into a steady murmur, was sit at the kitchen table with a piece of paper and work out his finances with the brutal honesty he usually reserved for himself alone. Added up what he had, added up what he owed, looked at the gap between them for a long time. Then he folded the paper and put it in the kitchen drawer and went to bed, because looking at a problem you can't solve that night doesn't help you sleep. She came to his fence line on a Thursday morning. He saw her walking across the Whitfield field from his east field, where he was checking the corn, and he recognized her stride, purposeful but not hurried. The walk of someone who had somewhere to be but wasn't being chased. She stopped at the fence. He walked over. "I took your advice," she said without preamble. About the second opinion, I had 2 soil analysts out this week. One confirmed almost everything you said about the north section. The other one wanted to plant alfalfa immediately, which I gather is wrong, Ray said. Yes. The corner of her mouth moved. That's what I thought too, based on what you told me. A pause. I also had someone look at the drainage channels. They said it would cost about $60,000 to properly restore the drainage on the north end. Ray nodded. That tracked. Is it worth it? She asked. Depends on your timeline and your reason for doing this. He leaned on the fence post. You planning to farm this land yourself, or are you going to lease it? She was quiet for a moment. And in that pause, Ray became aware of something he'd been noticing peripherally and not quite naming, that there was something unresolved about. Sophia's relationship to this land, something that went beyond practical agricultural questions. She had the manner of someone making a decision that had personal weight attached to it, not just financial calculation. I haven't decided yet, she said. Then don't spend $60,000 on drainage until you have, Ray said. Spend $500 on a proper soil study first. Get the data, then decide. She looked at him steadily. You're very practical. Practical's what this land requires. Most people I ask about this land have something to sell me, she said. You don't seem to. I'm not in the selling business. He straightened up. You want to see something? She looked at him. That north field you're asking about, he said. There's a point at the northeast corner where you can see the original wetland drainage. If you're going to make decisions about that soil, you should see what you're actually working with. He didn't know why he'd offered. It was just she was asking the right questions, and people who asked the right questions deserved real answers. Okay, she said. He opened the gate. They walked the perimeter of the north section for nearly an hour, Ray pointing out the subtle topographic indicators that told the land's history, the slight depressions that marked former water channels, the color variation in the soil that showed where the drainage had changed the ecology, the particular way certain weeds colonized the edges of former wetland. Sophia walked beside him and listened and asked questions that were increasingly specific and intelligent. And at some point, Ray became aware that he was enjoying himself in a way he hadn't expected. He wasn't a man who talked much, but he talked about land easily, the way some people talk about music or cooking, from a place of genuine knowledge that felt like home. My grandfather had 40 acres in eastern Tennessee, she said at one point. Is that where you're from? A brief pause. Partly. I grew up in several places. She said it in a way that discouraged follow-up, and Ray didn't follow up. Did you ever farm? He asked instead. No, I watched him. When I was small. She was looking at the soil at the edge of the drainage channel, crouching down to look at it the way he'd shown her, reading the color. He talked about land the way you talk about it, like it was something that had opinions. It does, Ray said. She looked up at him. Land tells you what it wants to do, he said. Your job is to listen first, then work with it. The people who fight it always lose eventually. She stood up. They were standing close enough that he could see the details of her face clearly, the slight crease of concentration between her brows, the way the August heat had put a faint color in her cheeks. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite parse. I have to ask you something, she said. Okay. Do you know who owns this property now? Ray shook his head. Heard it sold, don't know to who. She held his eyes for a moment. Me, she said. I do. He hadn't been certain, but he hadn't been entirely surprised either. He nodded slowly, processing. The whole parcel? He asked. All 240 acres. He looked out at the field. Did the math. 240 acres in this part of Harlan County. With a farmhouse and outbuildings, she would have paid somewhere north of $800,000 for it, assuming she hadn't gotten a remarkable deal. That was not the kind of money you accumulated by accident. You're not just someone who inherited some money, he said. It came out more directly than he'd intended, but she didn't seem offended. No, she said, I'm not. She didn't elaborate. And Ray, who had never been the kind of man to push at things that weren't offered, let it rest. They walked back to the fence line without speaking, and the silence was comfortable enough that neither of them felt the need to fill it. "I may need to ask you more questions," she said at the gate. "I'll be here," Ray said. He watched her walk back across the field and thought about the cost of 240 acres and the cost of $60,000 in drainage work, and thought about all the ways that money changed what was possible in a landscape he'd been navigating on the thinnest of margins for over a decade. He went home and fed the chickens and didn't think about it anymore, or tried not to. The black Suburban arrived on a Tuesday. Ray was under his truck. A persistent oil leak had been nagging at him for a week, and he'd finally cleared a morning to address it when he heard the tires on the gravel, the particular sound of a vehicle with significant weight and new rubber. He slid out from under the truck and stood, wiping his hands on a rag, as the Suburban came to a stop 20 feet from where he was standing. The man who got out was in his mid-40s, wearing a suit that cost more than Ray's truck, with the particular kind of composed and pleasant manner that Ray associated with people who were paid to be composed and pleasant on someone else's behalf. "Mr. Calloway," the man said, "that's me. My name is David Hargrove. I work for Aldridge Consolidated." He extended a business card between two fingers. Ray took it. "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Philip Aldridge." Ray looked at the card. Aldridge Consolidated Agricultural and Land Development. David Hargrove, Senior Director of Acquisitions. A Nashville address. A number. He looked up at Hargrove. "What does Aldridge Consolidated want with me?" Ray asked. Hargrove smiled, not insincerely, but with the practiced quality of a man who delivered messages for a living. "Mr. Aldridge would like to meet with you at your convenience. He's aware that you've been helpful to his daughter, and he wanted to express his appreciation in person." A pause. "He's currently in Lexington, and he'd be available as early as Thursday." Ray's mind moved through the implications at a measured pace. His daughter, Sophia Aldridge. He'd heard the name Aldridge Consolidated before. It was the kind of name that appeared in agricultural news. The kind of company that showed up when someone was talking about large-scale land deals or farming industry consolidation. He hadn't followed it closely. It wasn't his world. Now apparently it was knocking on his driveway. "What does he want to meet about?" Ray asked. He'd prefer to discuss that in person. Hargrove maintained his pleasant composure. "He asked me to convey that there's no obligation of any kind. He simply wants to talk." Ray turned the card over in his hands. Turned it back. "I'll think about it," he said. "Of course." Hargrove produced another card, his personal one, with a cell number handwritten at the bottom, and extended it. "Please feel free to call me anytime. Mr. Aldridge is flexible." The Suburban backed out with the same unhurried precision it had arrived with. Ray stood in his driveway for a long time after it left. He looked up Philip Aldridge that evening on his laptop. The old one that sat on the kitchen table with its cracked corner and its fan that never quite stopped running. What he found was significant. Philip Aldridge, 62, born in Knoxville, Tennessee. Founder and CEO of Aldridge Consolidated, a privately held agricultural conglomerate with operations in 11 states. An estimated annual revenue of $4.3 billion. And land holdings of roughly 900,000 acres across the continental United States. A man who had started with a single grain elevator in rural Tennessee at the age of 24 and built, over the course of 4 decades, one of the largest private agricultural businesses in the country. Photographs: a lean man with iron gray hair, a face that showed its years without apology. The kind of physical stillness in photographs that usually indicated either extreme composure or extreme authority, and in Philip Aldridge's case appeared to be both. Articles: expansion into the Midwest, a contentious acquisition of farmland in Iowa that had drawn criticism from family farming advocates, a charitable foundation focused on rural economic development, a profile in Forbes that described him as the most powerful man in American agriculture that most Americans have never heard of. One daughter, Sophia Marie Aldridge, notably private, rarely photographed. A degree from Duke in environmental science and a graduate certificate in land management from the University of Vermont. According to one brief mention in a Nashville business journal, she had recently taken a more active role in the company's land assessment operations. Ray closed the laptop. He sat in the kitchen with the ceiling fan turning, and Cole's math textbook open on the table, and the sound of the television coming faintly from Cole's room. He thought about Sophia walking the fence line in the August heat, crouching down to look at soil, saying, "I wanted to understand something before other people explained it to me." He didn't feel deceived. She hadn't lied to him, she'd simply not volunteered information that he hadn't asked for. He hadn't asked her last name. He hadn't asked who owned the land. When she'd finally told him it was hers, she hadn't hidden that either. He felt instead something harder to name. A sudden, acute awareness of the distance between their positions, not just financial, but structural, the kind of distance that reshapes the meaning of ordinary interactions in retrospect. Had she been curious about him because he was useful? Because her father had sent her out there to assess the land, and he'd made himself convenient? He didn't want to think that. The conversation had felt real. Her questions had felt genuine. But he was also a man who had learned to be careful about what he let himself want to believe. He called Hargrove the next morning and said he'd come to Lexington on Thursday. Cole found out before Thursday. Ray wasn't sure how. The county was small, and the information apparently traveled faster than he'd expected, but he came home from a hardware run Wednesday afternoon to find Cole sitting on the porch steps with his phone in his hand and an expression Ray hadn't seen on his face before. "You're going to meet Philip Aldridge?" Cole said. Ray sat down on the step below him. "Where'd you hear that?" "Marcus Beaumont. His dad saw the Suburban at our driveway." Cole held up his phone, a photo of a Forbes article headline. "Dad, this guy is worth like $4 billion. I know. Why does he want to meet you?" "I helped his daughter with her tractor," Ray said. "He wants to say thank you." Cole stared at him. "People like that don't drive to Kentucky to say thank you for a tractor." Ray almost smiled at that because the boy wasn't wrong. And the sharpness of the observation was both characteristic and, in this moment, slightly inconvenient. "Probably not just that," he admitted. "Then what?" "I don't know yet." He looked at Cole steadily. "That's what Thursday is for." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then, with the particular vulnerability that teenagers reveal only briefly and involuntarily before covering it again, "Are you going to be okay?" Ray put a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm going to be fine." Lexington was 2 hours north, and Ray drove it in his truck with the windows down for the first hour until the interstate made that impractical. He'd put on clean clothes, good jeans, a collared shirt, his least worn boots, and he was aware that this was the best version of what he owned, and that Philip Aldridge would understand immediately what that represented without being told. He'd decided on the drive up that he would not apologize for what he was. He would be courteous and direct and honest, and if that wasn't what Aldridge wanted, that was Aldridge's problem. The meeting was at a hotel in downtown Lexington, not a restaurant, not an office, which Ray thought was deliberately neutral ground. Hargrove met him in the lobby and took him up to a suite on the 11th floor. Philip Aldridge was standing at the window when Ray came in. He was taller than the photographs suggested, lean and straight with the posture of a man who had never let himself go soft, and he turned from the window and crossed the room with his hand out before Hargrove had finished saying Ray's name. "Ray Calloway," Aldridge said. His handshake was firm without being performative. "Thank you for making the drive. Appreciate the invitation," Ray said. They sat. Hargrove made himself absent. Coffee arrived. Aldridge looked at Ray for a moment with the quiet, evaluating attention of a man who had spent 4 decades reading people across tables. And Ray looked back at him without shifting, because he had spent 40 years being looked at and had long since stopped finding it unsettling. "My daughter speaks very highly of you," Aldrich said. "We talked a few times," Ray said. "She asks good questions." Something in Aldrich's expression moved subtly, the way strong faces move when something unexpected lands accurately. "She does," he said. "She also told me what you said about the Northfield, the soil analysis, the drainage assessment." A pause. "You were right about all of it. I've had 3 professionals look at it since, and your informal read of the situation was more accurate than 2 of the paid reports." Ray absorbed that without comment. "I understand you've been farming in Harlan County for 12 years, Aldrich said. "Leasing, yes, on Gerald Moore's land." Ray looked at him steadily. "You've done some research." "I do research," Aldrich said simply. "It's what I do." He sat back. "Ray, I'm going to be direct with you because I find it's the most efficient approach. I've been looking at Eastern Kentucky for a significant land investment for about 2 years. The Whitfield parcel is part of a larger picture. There are 4 other properties in that valley that I'm in various stages of discussion about, including Moore's land," Ray said. "Potentially." A careful pause. "I want to be clear about what that means and doesn't mean for people currently leasing in that area." "What does it mean?" "It means I'm not interested in displacing anyone whose relationship to the land is productive and long-term." Aldrich held his coffee cup, didn't drink from it. "What I've seen in 20 years of acquisitions is that the people who know the land best, who have been on it, worked it, learned its problems and its possibilities, are often the most valuable resource that comes with the property. More valuable than the acreage itself." Ray said nothing. "I'd like to offer you a consulting arrangement," Aldrich said. "Formal, paid, to advise on the assessment and development of the properties in the eastern Harlan County area as we move forward." He named a figure, an annual retainer, that was precisely 4 times what Ray cleared in a good farming year. The number sat in the air between them. Ray looked at it, not at Aldrich, at the idea of it, and thought about Cole and the kitchen table and the piece of paper he kept in the drawer. He thought about the worn-down tractor and the bearing that needed replacing, and the $400 at the supply store. Then he thought about what it would mean, what it would ask of him. "You want me to advise on land you might take from the people who farm it?" Ray said. Aldrich met his eyes. "I want to develop land in a way that doesn't destroy the communities that depend on it. I want someone who can tell me where that line is. And if I tell you something you don't want to hear, then I want to hear it anyway." A slight pause. "That's exactly why I'm asking you and not someone who works for me." Ray was quiet for a long moment. The room was air-conditioned to a temperature that felt slightly artificial, and outside the window Lexington moved in its downtown rhythms. And Ray thought about the dirt road and the raised hood, and the woman in the blue shirt who had looked at him without apology when she'd said, "I wanted to understand something first. I'd need to keep farming," Ray said. "That's not negotiable." "Understood." "And if I tell you a piece of land shouldn't be developed, or that a farmer's lease should be protected, that carries actual weight, not just consultation." Aldrich held his gaze. "I'll put it in writing. Then I'll think about it," Ray said. Aldrich almost smiled, not a small private smile, but something close to genuine respect. "That's all I'm asking," he said. Ray drove back to Harlan County in the long slant of the late afternoon sun, and the hills came back to him the way they always did, low and green and absolute, the kind of landscape that makes you feel simultaneously small and located. He didn't call Cole. He drove in silence and let the meeting settle. What sat heaviest was not the money, though the money sat significantly. What sat heaviest was the complexity of it. The fact that this opportunity came wrapped around a man who held, potentially, the future of his neighbors' livelihoods in his hands. That accepting it meant entering a room he'd never been in before, with rules he'd never learned. At a table where his plain-spokenness and his calluses and his 12 years of lease payments were going to look very, different than they did on a fence line in August. He passed the Whitfield parcel on the way home, Sophia's land now. He corrected himself, and without planning to, he slowed down. The tractor was in the field, running. He could see it moving in the distance, a small green shape against the long light, and even from the road he could tell it was being driven by someone who had recently learned how. He stopped the truck, watched for a moment, then drove on home. The consulting agreement arrived by email 4 days later, drafted by an Aldridge consolidated attorney and running 222 pages of language that Ray spent 3 evenings reading before he called the one lawyer he knew, Tom Garrett in Middlesbrough, who handled real estate and the occasional contract dispute and had helped Ray review his lease agreement 3 years ago and had him look it over. Tom called back the next morning. "Ray, I don't know who your friends are, but this is a legitimate contract," he said with a tone that suggested he found the whole thing slightly surreal. "The protections are real. The compensation is real. The clause about your independent judgment is enforceable." A pause. "I changed 3 things. Minor. I'm sending them the red line now." Aldridge's legal team responded within 6 hours. All 3 changes were accepted. Ray signed the contract on a Thursday afternoon at Tom Garrett's office, with Tom and Tom's paralegal as witnesses, and drove home feeling like a man who had stepped off a familiar path into different terrain and was still calculating whether the ground would hold. The first indication that the arrangement was going to be complicated came not from Philip Aldridge, but from his daughter. He saw Sophia at the property 2 days after signing. She was out with the land surveyor, and Ray was doing his own work on the adjacent field. And they spoke briefly across the fence line with the comfortable ease that had developed between them over the previous weeks. She knew about the consulting arrangement. Of course she did. "How do you feel about it?" she asked with the directness she'd shown from the beginning. "Uncertain," he said, "but present." She seemed to appreciate that answer. They talked for a few minutes about the surveyor's findings, and Ray answered 2 questions about the field elevation and then went back to his work. What he noticed, and tried not to read into, was that the quality of their interaction had shifted slightly, not coolly, not with any reduction of warmth, but she was more careful now, more measured. As though the formalization of the arrangement between Ray and her father had introduced a subtle self-consciousness that hadn't been there when he was just a neighbor helping with a broken engine. He noticed it. He didn't mention it. The situation with Gerald Moore arrived 11 days after the signing. Ray was in the supply store in Loyal when Pete Beaumont told him, in the particular quiet way of someone delivering information they know is going to land badly, "Gerald had a meeting with someone from Aldridge Consolidated yesterday. From what I hear, he's looking at an offer." Ray bought his supplies and drove home and called Hargrove. "I need to know what's happening with the Moore property," Ray said. Hargrove was professional and careful. An initial conversation was held, he said. "No offer has been formally presented." "What's Aldridge's intention?" "Ray, I think this is a conversation best had with Mr. Aldridge directly, then get him on the phone." Philip Aldridge called him back within 20 minutes, which told Ray something about how the man prioritized things. "You're moving on Moore's land," Ray said. "We're in a preliminary conversation," Aldridge said. "Nothing more. Gerald Moore has 6 tenants on that land. 4 of them have been there over a decade. If you buy him out and restructure the operation, those leases are at risk." A brief pause. "That's exactly why I wanted someone with your knowledge on the team," Aldridge said. "Tell me about those tenants," Ray told him. All 4. He knew them, their histories, their operations, their contributions to the land and the community. He laid it out with the same specificity he'd applied to soil analysis, because these were the same kind of facts, just human ones. Aldridge listened without interrupting. Then, "I'll factor this into the assessment." "Factor it in or act on it," Ray said. Another pause, longer this time. "I understand what you're asking," Aldridge said, "and I respect it. But I need you to understand something too. I run a business. If the economics of preserving those leases don't work within the model, I have a fiduciary responsibility that constrains what I can guarantee. Then we have a problem, Ray said, because I have a clause in my contract that says my independent judgment carries weight, and my independent judgment says those 4 people should keep their land. The silence that followed was the kind that contained actual thinking. Send me their profiles, Aldridge said at last. Operations, acreage, yield history, everything you have. I want the full picture before any offer is finalized. Ray spent the rest of the day compiling what he knew, calling 2 of the farmers directly to get specifics, and emailing the document to Hargrove by evening. He didn't know if it would matter, but it was what he'd been brought on to do, and he was going to do it fully or not at all. Cole found the contract. Ray had left it on the kitchen table, not intentionally careless, just the accumulated distraction of a man running too many problems simultaneously, and came in from an evening chore to find Cole sitting at the table with the document in front of him, not reading it, just looking at the first page. "Dad," Cole said. "Yeah, this retainer number." Cole pointed at the page. "Is this real?" Ray pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "It's real." Cole looked up. His face had a complicated expression on it, something that was layered with feelings he was still learning to name. Ray recognized it because he'd felt the same thing himself when he'd first seen the number. "Are we going to be okay now?" Cole asked. The word "now," that particular syllable, hit Ray somewhere below his sternum, because it contained within it everything Cole had been carrying. All the years of careful watching, of a teenager's peripheral awareness of the tension that money trouble puts in a house, of listening to the way his father's voice changed slightly when bills were discussed. "Yeah," Ray said. "We're going to be okay." Cole nodded, looked at the document again. "What do you have to do for it?" "Tell a man the truth about land," Ray said. Cole considered that for a moment. "Can you do that?" Ray almost smiled. "Better than I can do most things." Cole stood up, put the contract back where he'd found it, and went to the refrigerator. He came back with 2 sodas and put one in front of Ray, and they sat for a while in the kitchen's evening quiet. Not talking, just sitting in the same space with the first real ease they'd shared in a long time. The complication with Sophia came on a Wednesday evening. She called him. He'd given her his number for agricultural questions weeks ago, and said, "I need to ask you something off the record." "I'm not sure there is an off the record, given my current arrangement," Ray said. "I know, I'm asking anyway." A pause. "Is my father's interest in the Eastern Valley really about agricultural development, or is it primarily about consolidation?" Ray was quiet. "Because if it's the latter," Sophia continued, her voice controlled but carrying something beneath the control, "the people in this county need to know that. And the framing he's been using, rural development, sustainable farming, is misleading." "Why are you asking me?" Ray said. "Because I think you'd tell me the truth." Another pause. "And because you're the only person in this situation who doesn't work for him." Ray thought about this for a long moment. He thought about the contract and the clause about independent judgment and what it meant to have been brought into a situation, at least partly, because Philip Aldridge had assessed him as someone who wouldn't easily be managed. "What I know," Ray said carefully, "is that your father has made me a commitment in writing that tenant farmers will be considered in any acquisition decision. Whether that commitment is the core of his interest or a condition attached to it, I don't know yet." "I'm still figuring that out." Sophia was quiet. "What I do know," Ray continued, "is that if I find out the commitment is performative, I'll say so, publicly, if necessary." He let that sit for a moment. "Does that answer your question?" "Part of it," she said softly. "What's the rest of it?" A long pause. Then, "I've been trying to figure out whether to trust this situation. Being here, working this land, being involved in something my father is building. I'm not sure my instincts about it are reliable." "Why not?" "Because I want it to be real," she said. "I want what I'm doing here to matter. And when you want something to be true, You're not always the best judge of whether it is. Ray was standing at his kitchen window looking out at the dark. The cicadas were going. The first stars were out over the east field. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know that feeling." The line was silent for a moment, not uncomfortably, but with the particular weight of two people who have both said something true and are giving it space. "Ray," she said. "Yeah, thank you for being straight with me from the beginning. I don't know how to be anything else," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I called." The night before the formal acquisition meeting, the one where Philip Aldridge was presenting his offer for Moorsland to Gerald and his attorney. With Ray present as a consultant, Ray sat on his porch for a long time and thought about the distance he'd traveled in 6 weeks. Not physical distance. The kind that measured itself in context and implication, and the particular social weight of sitting in a room where you are the poorest person present, and also the one being asked to speak honestly. He thought about his father, who had farmed rented land in eastern Tennessee for 30 years and died having never owned an acre of it, and who had said to Ray once, Ray had been maybe 12, "The land doesn't care what you own, it just cares what you do with it." He thought about Cole, asleep inside, about the soda put in front of him without being asked. He thought about Sophia walking a fence line in August heat, crouching down to read soil she was learning to love. He went to bed. In the morning, he put on his clean clothes and drove to the meeting. The meeting was held in the conference room of an attorney's office in Harlan. Gerald Moore, his attorney, Philip Aldridge, David Hargrove, a woman from Aldridge's legal team, and Ray Calloway, sitting at a table that cost more than his truck. Ray had been in rooms like this exactly once before, when he'd reviewed his lease agreement 3 years ago in Tom Garrett's much smaller office. And he'd felt then what he felt now, a precise awareness of his place in the social architecture, the way the room read him, the way the quality of his clothes and his hands and his manner communicated a story to everyone present before he said a word. He let them read it. He'd stopped trying to revise that particular story a long time ago. Gerald Moore looked at Ray with an expression that was part weariness and part something that might have been respect, or might have been resentment. Ray had seen both on Gerald's face over 12 years, and sometimes still had trouble telling them apart. Philip Aldridge opened the meeting with the practiced ease of a man who had sat in 1,000 rooms like this one, laying out the offer for the Moore parcel, the price, the terms, the proposed use designation, in clear and organized language that left little room for ambiguity. When he finished, he said, "I've asked Ray Calloway to share his assessment of the current agricultural operations on the property." Everyone looked at Ray. Ray put his notes on the table, 1 page handwritten, the information he'd compiled on the 4 tenant farmers. He spoke for 8 minutes. He covered each farmer by name, their years on the land, their acreage and yields, their relationships to the specific soil conditions of each parcel, their economic significance to the local supply chain. He described what would be lost if their leases were restructured or not renewed, not in sentimental terms, but in specific, functional ones. Lost agricultural knowledge, lost relationships to particular soil conditions, lost continuity that would cost any new operation years of expensive learning to replace. The room was quiet when he finished. Gerald Moore was looking at Ray with an expression he couldn't read at all. "What would you recommend?" Aldridge said. "Guaranteed lease renewals at current rates for a minimum of 5 years with a right of first refusal if the land use changes," Ray said. Built into the purchase agreement, not as a separate commitment, the Aldridge attorney was making notes. Gerald Aldridge said, "That's acceptable to us if it's acceptable to you." Gerald Moore looked at the offer sheet in front of him. He was a practical man. Ray had always known that, and practical men measured the cost of conditions against the value of the offer and arrived at conclusions without too much drama. "It's acceptable," Gerald said. The meeting lasted another 40 minutes. When it was over, Ray walked out into the Harlan sunlight, and stood on the sidewalk and breathed. Hargrove came out behind him. "That was well done," he said. "Genuine, not performed." Ray nodded once. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt steady, like a bearing that had been stressed and had held. Sophia was at the property when he got back. He didn't know she was going to be there. She'd driven down from wherever she'd been, and she was standing at the fence line where they'd first talked about the north field, looking at it, when he pulled in. He walked over. She heard him coming and turned. "How did it go?" she asked. "The leases are protected," he said. She closed her eyes for just a moment, opened them. "All four?" "All four." She looked at him, and the expression on her face was something he hadn't seen there before. A release of something that had been held tight for a long time, something personal and complicated that went deeper than the agricultural question. "He actually did it," she said quietly. Not entirely to Ray, more to herself. "He's not a bad man," Ray said. "He's just used to not being held to his word by the people around him." She looked at him sharply, then nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said. "That's exactly right." They stood at the fence for a while. The late afternoon was starting to cool. September was a week away, and the heat had begun to make concessions, and the light over the Whitfield land was the particular gold of late summer, the kind that makes everything look slightly more valuable than it is. "Can I show you something?" Sophia said. He followed her across the field to the northeast corner, the old wetland area he'd shown her months ago. The drainage channel assessment stakes were still there from the survey, and at one end of the section someone had recently cleared the ground and turned the soil, and the dark, rich smell of it rose in the cooling air. "I started it," she said. "Just a small section, to see what it would do." Ray crouched down, took a handful of the turned soil, pressed it between his fingers. It was dense and moist and dark, the color of something that had been holding potential for a long time. "It's good," he said. "I know." She was crouching beside him, looking at the soil with an expression of genuine joy that was uncomplicated and entirely real. "It's really good." He looked at her. She was looking back at him. They were both crouching in dirt in the late afternoon of an ordinary Tuesday, surrounded by the smell of turned earth and the sound of the valley moving through the transition from summer to fall. And Ray thought, "This is the most honest thing I've been part of in a long time." He didn't say that. He just stood up and said, "You're going to need cover crop before winter if you want to protect this section." "I know," she said, standing up too, brushing her hands on her jeans. "I was going to ask you which one." "Crimson clover," he said. "It'll fix the nitrogen and it comes back red in the spring." She was smiling now, not the careful, composed smile she'd had in the first weeks, but the real one, the one that used her eyes. "I like that," she said. "Good." They walked back toward the fence line, and the last of the day's gold was stretching long and thin across the field. And somewhere in the tree line the mockingbird was at it again, that relentless, inventory-taking song. "Ray," she said as they reached the fence. "Yeah." She stopped, turned to face him fully. "I want to do this right," she said. And she meant the land, but she didn't entirely mean only the land, and they both knew that, and neither of them ran from the knowing. "Then learn it slowly," he said. "Don't rush the first season, listen to what it tells you." He looked at the field, "And when you get it wrong, because you will, come find me." She held his eyes. "I will," she said. He nodded, opened the gate back to his side of the property. "I'll drop some crimson clover seed by tomorrow," he said, "and a planting guide. Thank you." He walked back across his field in the long last light, and behind him he heard the gate close with the soft, solid sound of a latch properly set. October arrived the way October does in Harlan County, without announcement but with unmistakable authority. The mornings had a new weight to them, a coolness that got into the bones before 7 and reminded a man that the easy season was done and the serious work of preparation had arrived. Ray was up at 4:30. He fed the chickens in the dark, moving through the familiar routine with the ease of 10,000 repetitions, And when he came back inside, Cole was already up, which was new. A shift that had started about 2 weeks ago, the boy rising earlier, volunteering for morning chores without being asked, as though some internal clock had finally synchronized with the demands of the life they were living. They didn't speak much over coffee. They didn't need to. The kitchen held them comfortably in its silence. The two of them reading the morning the way farmers read it, by sound, by light quality, by the specific feeling of the air coming through the screen door. Cole had pulled a B+ on his last math exam. Ray had framed the paper, not on the wall, that would have embarrassed the boy, but folded neatly in the kitchen drawer next to the piece of paper with the finances on it. He'd looked at both of them on the same evening and felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for longer than he could remember. The Crimson Clover went into Sophia's northeast section on a Saturday in early October, Ray driving the planting equipment while she walked the rows behind him, learning the pace of it, asking questions at the right intervals. She'd hired a part-time farmhand, a young man named Curtis Webb from Loyal, 23, and eager and willing to be taught. And the three of them worked through the afternoon with the focused quiet of people who understood what they were doing and why it mattered. Sophia had taken a soil management course in September, online through the University of Kentucky Agricultural Extension Program. She'd told Ray about it almost shyly, and he'd told her it was a good idea. And she'd pulled out her notebook and showed him her notes. And he'd added 3 things in the margins, and she'd written them down with the same focused attention she'd brought to every piece of information he'd given her. She was learning the land, really learning it, not as an investment, not as an abstraction, but as a thing with its own character and history and demands. He watched her walk the clover rows in the October light and thought, she's going to be good at this. Philip Aldridge called in the 3rd week of October. The Moore acquisition closes next week, he said. I wanted you to know. Good, Ray said. The lease protections are in the final document, as agreed. A pause. I've also asked Hargrove to reach out to the 4 tenant farmers individually to introduce the new arrangement. I want them to hear it from someone in person, not in a letter. Ray hadn't expected that. That's the right call, he said. You told me what the right call was, Aldridge said. I'm executing it. Another pause, and Ray heard in it the slight shift of a man who was about to say something that required more personal register than business language allows. I've been in this business for 40 years, Ray. I've made a lot of acquisitions. Some of them I handled well, and some of them I didn't. He was quiet for a moment. Having someone in the room who tells me the difference, that's not nothing. No, Ray said. It's not. I'd like to extend the consulting arrangement, Aldridge said. 12 months, same terms. There are 2 more properties in the area I'm looking at, and I want you involved from the beginning. Ray looked out his kitchen window at his east field, where the corn had been harvested, and the stalks were cut low, and the ground was resting in its autumn quiet. Same clause? Ray said. Independent judgment? Enforceable? Same clause. Then yes, Ray said. The first frost came on a Tuesday night in late October, and Ray walked his property in the morning to assess it. The way he did after every first frost, checking which crops had been adequately prepared, which hadn't, making notes for next year. He stopped at the fence line. Across the field, the northeast section of Sophia's land showed a faint green, the first emergence of the crimson clover, coming up through the frost-touched soil with the quiet, resolute push of something that had been planted correctly and was now doing exactly what it was supposed to do. He looked at it for a while. The valley around him was still in the particular way of frost mornings, every sound absorbed into the cold, the light coming flat and pale over the hills. The whole landscape held in a breath before the day began in earnest. Ray thought about what it meant to be in a place, not to own it, not to have power over it, but to know it, to have learned its soils and its seasons, and its particular way of making demands on the people who tried to work with it rather than against it. He thought about his father and his father's hands. He thought about Cole eating breakfast in the warm kitchen behind him. He thought about 4 tenant farmers who didn't know yet that their livelihoods were going to survive another year, and the morning they'd find out. He thought about Sophia, who had driven a tractor she didn't know how to run down a road she barely knew she owned, and had asked the right questions to the first honest person she found. He thought about what it meant to be seen, not measured, not leveraged, not positioned, just seen, by the land that held you accountable without asking for permission, by a son who put a soda in front of you at the end of a long day, by a woman who called you when she wanted to hear the truth. He turned and walked back to his house, his boots leaving dark prints in the frost. Inside, Cole had made eggs. Ray hung his jacket on the peg by the door, sat down at the kitchen table, and ate breakfast with his son in the October morning, while outside the clover kept coming up green. The northeast section of the Whitfield parcel bloomed red the following April, crimson clover in full flower, visible from the road, the kind of sight that made people slow their trucks and look. Curtis Webb photographed it and put it on his phone. Cole drove by on his way home from school and texted his father. It worked. Ray read the text at the supply store, standing in the lumber aisle, and put his phone back in his pocket and finished his shopping. Some things didn't need a response. They just needed to be true.